And welcome back to another Wheel of Time video. Today I'm going to be talking about the recently released Origins of the Wheel of Time, which I finished reading this afternoon, literally right before I had to go and leave for work. And so what I'm going to talk about here are my favorite revelations, I guess, things I learned, my favorite things that I learned from reading this book. So this video is not in any way going to be a replacement for this excellent, excellent book. Actually, as I say that, it probably would be smart before going into the very, very spoiler section to tell you in a non-spoilery way what I thought about this book. In a word, it's fantastic. Michael Livingston's writing, it's compelling and incredibly informative without feeling like a boring lecture. Like, he's giving you lots and lots of information in an incredibly, I don't do book reviews a lot, so I don't really know the words that people use to describe these sorts of things typically. I think digestible is a word that I hear a lot, but that doesn't really capture what I mean. He's very, to me anyway, he's obviously an academic, because one of the jobs that I do here in Korea is I edit papers for an academic journal, and so I can recognize academic writing, and I see that in what he's writing, but he's writing it in such a way that it's meant to be accessible to everyone, but more than that digestibility, it's enjoyable and it's engaging. Okay, I'll say this. I had fully planned when I got the book to flip immediately to the ends in the glossary and find the details about a certain thing. But once I got the book, I opened it and it was the introduction, and I was pulled in immediately and ended up just reading the book sequentially. The urgency that I had felt before the book was in my hand, or the file was in my Kindle, I should say, the urgency that I had felt to go to the ends and find it out about that, if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. That urgency left me almost immediately, just a few sentences into the introduction, because it pulled me in so much. If you've been following people who've already read the book, you've probably heard people say that they cried while reading it, especially the first half, which is about Jordan. And I will add my voice to that. I cried at least twice yesterday while reading the first half of the book. This book is going to give you a lot of insight into who Robert Jordan was, and the members of Team Jordan, and his thought process while writing, and the way the story grew and changed, which was so incredibly fascinating to me. I don't do book reviews. Like, that's not what this channel has been thus far, so I don't really know how to do this. Like if it's stars, I'm giving it a 5 stars. If it's out of 10, I'm giving it a 10. This book it far exceeded my expectations. I think what I was expecting was just a dry recitation of facts that, I was going to enjoy learning the facts, but I wasn't necessarily going to enjoy the process of reading them to know them. But when I read those academic papers, sometimes there's really, really fascinating information in the papers, but I very rarely enjoy the actual reading of the papers because they aren't meant to be enjoyed. They're meant to be informative. That, I think, is what I was expecting. But what I got was information that was presented to me in such an engaging way, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So, yeah, that's my spoiler-free review, and now I'm going to go into my favorite things that I learned from reading this book. And so, spoiler warning, when I say spoilers, this is complete spoilers for the Wheel of Time series, and obviously I'm also going to be spoiling things from the Origins of the Wheel of Time itself. So if you want to read that book completely cold, then I suggest you turn back now. If you haven't finished the Wheel of Time books like the series, there are spoilers coming for the end of the book series, so go away! Or, don't. I'm not your boss, but seriously, go away. I don't like spoiling people, so the rest of you, let's go.
Let's be nerdy, babe. Let's be nerdy, let's be nerdy. Let's be nerdy, babe. Let's be nerdy, babe. Let's be nerdy, let's be nerdy, babe.
So this is not really going to be in any particular order. These are just the things that made me go, ooh, or even like, what? when I was reading. And the first of these is that Robert Jordan once wrote a sex scene that involved a duck. Or maybe saying he wrote it is wrong. He might have just described a sex scene to Harriet, who was at the time his future wife. He described a sex scene that he was thinking of writing in a book that involved a duck. And I don't know why, but that just delights me. The second thing is a more general fact that I'll definitely be getting into some more specifics on later, but it was utterly fascinating to see how the story evolved from its original sort of nascent form to become what we know of as the Wheel of Time. To sort of see his, like through his notes, how he would change his mind or hone a general idea into a character or a plot point. I would honestly encourage anyone who is a Jordan fan and an aspiring writer to read this, because I would imagine you would find it really encouraging to know how many times he self-corrected or he reworked his ideas. And then, like, when he would start writing, Harriet said that she often didn't get to see his work at all until it was, like, in its 12th draft. The next point or thing that I learned from this book that was meaningful, like, this is a very personal one to me, just because of my own personal experience with the Wheel of Time. When Robert Jordan passed away, I, along with everyone who was a fan at the time, I'm sure, was devastated. I was obviously sad because this beloved author who had created this world and these people that I adore had died. But, and this feels callous to say, but I was also grieving the fact that I would never get to know how his story ended. And after, I'm not sure how long after his passing, but after I had finished yet another reread of the till then published books, I went online to look and see if there was a possibility of another author finishing his story. And what I found was a quote which is actually in Origins of the Wheel of Time, where he said something like, no one else will finish his book. He had made arrangements for all of his notes to be destroyed and his hard drives to be reformatted and wiped and whatnot. So, no, was the answer. And he seemed really, really adamant about it in that quote. So all of this time since then, like when I heard that Brandon Sanderson was finishing the books, and when I've talked to people who had access to his notes, all these years since then, I've had mixed feelings about it because of that quote. I've never talked about it with other fans because I didn't want to pass on those feelings to other people. Like if they hadn't read that quote or they hadn't heard him say that, they could just enjoy all of this, just guilt-free. So for me, like there are more emotional moments in this, like in Origins, that made me cry, but one of them was finding out that he changed his mind about this. Like this isn't something that needs to be guessed about or read into. We aren't inferring. It's known. It's a fact. He completely changed his mind on this and was preparing for having someone else finish the series in case the worst happened. And this released some guilt that I'd had about about having violated his wishes. Like I haven't read the what do you call it, the so-called, I guess, sequel to Kill a Mockingbird because I don't think Harper Lee ever intended to have that book published. But I couldn't stop myself from reading the final books in the Wheel of Time, and I felt guilty about it all these years. So for me, that was a big deal. It was a huge relief. Okay, so moving on to the next point. I had an Arthurian legend obsession when I was in my 20s, and so I've always just loved the allusions and parallels to that story in the Wheel of Time. Reading Origins was an absolute delight because there are so many more links to Arthurian legend than I had caught. I can't really list them all here because it would just take way, way too long. But my favorite one is Berelain. Now, okay, obviously I had seen the connection with her family line. Like, her name is Berelain, was it? Berelain sur Pendrag Perron or something? And that Pendrag is very, very clearly a tie to Arthur Pendragon, like the King Arthur of legend. But that's linking her to King Arthur, like, through Arthur Hawkwing, and that's very clear, and it doesn't really link her directly to the legend. Okay, I did not see the link between her and one of the many, many Elaines in Arthurian legend. Elaine of Corbinic, she's the one, I'm talking like I'm assuming you know this. Okay, there's this Elaine in Arthurian legend who tricks Sir Lancelot into sleeping with her by pretending or somehow tricking him into thinking that she's Guinevere. It is problematic as hell. There is a lot of problematic shit that happens in Arthurian legend. Berelain, much like this Elaine of legend, tries to problematically get a man who does not want her into bed. That's one. But, okay, and I can't believe I did not see this one. Berelain in the books takes a ter'angreal during the last battle to Lan, right? Lan, I think most of us probably saw, it's pretty clear, is an allusion to Lancelot from Arthurian legend. I mean, the name alone, but also the courtly love, the stoic warrior, it's all there. But okay. In the books, the same Elaine, or in the Arthurian legend, the same Elaine heals Lancelot with the Holy Grail. It's such a cool parallel that I can't believe I didn't see it. I think the reason I didn't see it was that I was just so blinded by the problematic shit that Berelaine does to be able to see past it into the roots of her character. Another thing that I absolutely loved was seeing how he came up with the names. I obviously can't go through all of them. There are like 2,500 named characters or so in the books, and not all of them are mentioned in Origins, but a lot of them are, and it is an amazing thought process. The detail and the research that went into naming them, it's fascinating. Some of them are just so incredibly detailed. Okay, for example, there's, how do you say, Al-Salam Saeed Almadar, I think is how his name is said, he's the king of Eridoman. Now, I've said many times on my channel, I grew up incredibly religious, so I will say, when I was reading the books, like physically, when I saw his name in the books, I actually read it as the name it's derived from. I read it as Absalom. Absalom is from the Bible, and it's one of my favorite stories from the Bible. It's not a happy story. It's an incredibly tragic story. And I'm not talking about the Bible as a religious text right now. Like a lot of times people forget that beyond its religious significance, it's actually also a historical record of a people or whatever. It's like the Old Testament is a historical record of the Jewish people. And so there are narratives and characters. And the story of Absalom is one that I would reread over and over again as a child. Like, I had a picture Bible, which is like a comic book Bible, and I would reread this section over and over again because it was so compelling. Also incredibly, incredibly tragic. But okay, back to Origins. The name Al-Salam in the books, I knew it had to do with Absalom in the Bible, but I just assumed that he picked the name because it sounded cool. I never noticed the parallel. Absalom from the Bible rebels against his father, King David. He leaves his country, which causes chaos and causes the nation to split into two. Basically, he causes a civil war. Similarly, Al-Salam in the books, he leaves Eridoman, or his absence, I should say, from Eridoman, causes chaos. This was not just a random, oh, that's a cool name, I'll put it in the books. No, like, there's a link there. I can't believe that I didn't realize or notice, I guess, that the name of the Aiel is derived from Israel, a nation of people who, according to Judeo-Christian tradition, wandered in the desert for 40 years in order to prepare themselves for the fulfillment of a prophecy. I don't know. I never made the connection. But it isn't just the Bible that he gets his ideas for names from. There are characters and places with names inspired by Norse mythology, Celtic mythology, African history, etc. And some are a combination of several ideas and concepts put together. It's incredible how much thought went into the names in these books. So, it may shock you to know that one of my absolute favorite names to learn the origins of was the Gen Aiel. Jordan dug so deep into all the mythology and cultures of the world to name the characters and the peoples in this world that he created. And the Gen Aiel, they were named for his stove. He had a Jenner stove in his kitchen, and I guess he liked the name and gave it to this particular tribe of the Aiel. And I don't know why, but I love that. I love that there are some names where he's like, okay, I'm going to name this character for the title of a 15th century Indian sex manual, not the Kama Sutra. I'll pick another one. Combined with an old English word for spear. Yes, I'll combine these very two disparate concepts, and that's how I'll make the name Arengar, because that's how he made Arengar. And then there's another character, and he's like, she's a girl who grins a lot. I know, her name is Elsie Grinwell, because Elsa grins well. I love it. I love that he allowed himself to do both of those things. Other notable examples that I particularly liked, Padan Fain. I didn't make the connection, perhaps other people did, but Fain, the name Fain, to feign, like the verb to feign, is to pretend to be or do something that you aren't being or doing. That is a perfect name for him. Gitara Moroso's name is derived from the the Spanish word for the Romani people, who are very, very associated with fortune-telling. And Machin Shin is a machine of sin. There are so many more. Just read the book. It's so interesting. Another one. Origins also confirms a theory that I've heard from a lot of people. According to Jordan's notes, Galad is a channeler. He just doesn't know it yet. And that is super cool. Oh, okay. So you're probably all waiting for me to talk about Nakomi. So yes, I obviously want to know about Nakomi. And it is revealed in Origins. So Nakomi is, if you don't want to know, I guess stop now. I don't know. But Nakomi is, as many have suspected and theorized, Nakomi is an avatar of the light. She's a mirror to Shaidar Haran. But also, like her body, her birth, she's a member of the Gen Aiel, because the Gen Aiel are still apparently around. Now, if you listen to Tar Valon After Dark, which is the podcast that I do with Nablus and Jess from the Amelin Study YouTube channel, you probably already heard me talk about this. Nakomi being the avatar of the light, I said, before I had read Origins, like we recorded our podcast before the books was out, her being in the avatar of the light, that was the least interesting theory about her to me. And it's true. Which is probably why I forgot to mention it until now. It's not that I'm disappointed by the theory. It's just that the theory just sort of, it answers all the questions. Like, there isn't much more to say about it. She's the avatar. Done. However, linking this theory with the Gen Aiel and saying the Gen Aiel are still around, that fascinates me. And I love that. That opens up something in this world that I think is ripe for exploration and speculation. One of the things we actually talked about as well on Tar Valon After Dark, Nablus had said that as much as he was looking forward to reading Origins, he was also kind of sad to have all of the questions answered, because this is one of the wonderful things about this story and this fandom, the theorizing and the speculation and yeah. Now I'm remembering I cried at least 3 times because there was another moment. The pipe. So, Maria from Team Jordan, was going to ask Robert Jordan about the pipe. Like, she still has her notes from when they were meeting regularly. And on one of her lists of questions that she had planned to ask him, actually the next day from having written this list, was, how did Rand light the pipe? She had been planning to ask him the following day, but Robert Jordan passed away before she could ask him. And I cried when I read that, and when I'm talking to you about it now. I cried, though, not because I was sad that we'd never know, but because it felt like a gift that he'd left us. Like Nablus had said, that he was somewhat sad that we were going to have all the answers, and this was Robert Jordan going, don't worry, I know my fans, I know what they want, here's a mystery. Have fun. Okay, so I needed a minute to recover. So I'll move on from that to something rather hilarious and silly, just to give myself a little more time to recover. The Ogier. Oh my god. The Ogier were originally going to be, and I shit you not, they were originally going to be cannibals. They were going to practice ritual cannibalism. I don't even know what else to say. Okay, so now, in addition to getting the ebook, I also got the audiobook, so I could switch back and forth between them on my, commute to work. And if you don't know, the audiobook, at least on Audible, I don't know about other platforms, includes an interview with Rosamund Pike about the recording of the audiobooks for The Wheel of Time. I still haven't listened to her versions yet, not from any aversion to the idea. As much as I love Kay Redding and Michael Kramer's version, I'm excited to hear Rosamund Pike's version. To me, it's like seeing the same play performed by different actors. Every actor is going to bring something different to the role, which will give you a new perspective on it. So I'm actually excited to hear her version. I just happened to already be in the middle of a reread or a re-listen when I found out that she was doing it, so I'll listen to hers the next time I'm going through the books. But I have to tell you, listening to her talk about it made me quite excited to hear her version. The interview was really interesting. She's putting her all into reading these books, like for the audiobooks, and she's putting her all into this world. There's a lot of interesting detail in her interview. I was surprised, actually, at how interested I found myself in the part about the process of recording an audiobook, the way she prepares and comes up with her voices. But the most interesting detail for me was that she said her voice for Moraine in the audiobooks is different than her voice for Moraine in the show. And her explanation for why I found fascinating. Moraine in the books is more distant and unknowable. That's not exactly how she words it, but Moraine in the show is more approachable. And this makes perfect sense to me. In the show, Moraine is much more central to the show, so her voice and her character, she has to be more open for us, the viewers, to care. I don't know. It's a great interview. If you have a chance, if you have Audible or some other audiobook service, I actually don't know. I don't know about other services. I don't know if it's on, like, if this interview is included in others, but whatever. If you can find it, it's a good interview. Check it out. And, okay, I'm going to end here with what I'm sure you must have all known I was building towards with my girl Nynaeve. First of all, okay, I loved learning that when he was first outlining this story, Robert Jordan gave as much time and focus to the character of Nynaeve as he did to Rand. And according to his notes, Nynaeve's story was initially going to be a lot darker than it was. There are still traces of that original darkness. For example, in her interaction with Balthamel in The Eye of the World and in her accepted test, you can still see remnants of his original idea, which was to have Balthamel do a thing that I cannot say on YouTube without having the algorithm punish me, but I'm sure you can guess. Okay, just aside from just sort of seeing the origins of Nynaeve and how she grew from a nascent idea in his mind to the woman that I know and love, I just made a video about unfired Chekhov's guns in the Wheel of Time. A video which was inspired by Nynaeve and something I noticed during this latest reread I'm doing. And that is that Nynaeve, in the course of taking her accepted test, the one that I just mentioned, where Balthamel is there, she gets stigmata, which, if you don't know what stigmata is, she gets scars in the center of her hands, which are reminiscent of the wounds in Christ's hands from the crucifixion. In Western literature, giving such blatant Christ imagery to a character has very strong and obvious implications. And so I saw this as an unfired gun, because why did Nynaeve get this? Not Rand. Like, okay, Jordan gave Nynaeve stigmata. He symbolically, he crucified her. But then he never had her die and come back. Now, there were some really cool comments on that video that I just did, in particular one by my friend Sean Siné, that I think gave a very cool and valid interpretation of that stigmata that I really like, about how Moraine, Nynaeve, and Rand can be seen as a symbol of the Trinity during the last battle. But I think the actual reason for the stigmata is present in his notes. Nynaeve was originally slated to die, and the plan was for her to rise from the dead. Now, originally the plan was for her to be brought back by the Dark One as a servant of the Dark, but he changed his mind, and I'm very glad he did. I'm not sure when in the writing process he changed. According to the book, a lot of his notes are undated, so it's sometimes hard to tell. It could be that he changed his mind about this long before writing that passage as it appears in The Great Hunt. But he still maybe just liked the symbolism of the stigmata. Or maybe at this point he was still thinking of killing and resurrecting Nynaeve. I don't know. Either way, that particular revelation in Origins just blew my mind because I had just talked about this. And, okay, I think I'm gonna end this here. Honestly, I fully recommend this book. There is so much more than I've gone over here. And if this sort of thing is interesting to you, then this book will definitely be worth it for you. So pick it up. If you have read this book, what were your favorite things that you learned while reading it? If you are going to pick it up, what sort of things are you hoping to learn? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like my content and you want to support me, I do have a Patreon, which is linked in the description below. To my patrons, I know I say the same thing every time, but just because it's still true, I am so grateful to you, truly. Thank you so much for your support. And with that, I will end this here. So please like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!